the big question that's coming up with copyright is whether that fair use for scraping, kind of taking little bits of information off of everyone's websites, can that scrape be used for training these AI models? I am a lecturer at the University of Texas here in Austin. I teach in the fine arts side of things, teaching a lot of game development classes, everything from programming to design. But I also teach quite a few classes on AI. But I also run my own game company. I've been doing that for about 12 years. And as part of that role, I've been experimenting with AI and machine learning since about 2015 to 2017. Fair use in the US is a doctrine that essentially permits some limited use of copyright beyond kind of the original intent of copyright law. Fair use in general is attempting to adapt to the digital age, right? We're talking about laws that have existed for hundreds of years, and how we apply them today is pretty challenging. The real question that I think we're going to see quite commonly is whether the amount and substance matters. So there's this term, the Minimus Effect defense, which is saying we use so little of it, we use such a small piece that we're not really impeding on the copyright only because it was such a small element, right? And the concept that the AI model creation tools has is that it's using such a small piece, such a small amount of billions of images. So if it's using only a little bit of many, many images, is it impeding on each one's copyright? Or by using such small samples from each one, is it actually kind of passing through that de minimis? So I believe personally, that's where we're going to see the defense go, and that's kind of where we're going to see the copyright law and arguments come. From my perspective, the question of whether these tools should use copyrighted materials, should they be scraped? I'm of the belief that they could and they should, but the output that comes from them should not be copyrightable itself. That is of my personal opinion, is that if you use a tool that creates images that came from a 5 gigabyte or 100 terabyte scrape of 5 billion images off the internet, and you make something new from it, I don't think you should be able to copyright that image itself. So in 2022, China announced that any content made with AI image tools, text tools, any media needs to be watermarked, right? It needs a clear label that says this was made with AI. China was the first major country to do this, right? We in the US are kind of discussing it. The European Union, some other locations are considering this option. And I personally think it's a very smart idea, saying, hey, like, you want to do AI stuff, you want to post it on the internet, just make sure that somewhere it's recognized as such. A great example of this, a couple of weeks ago, there was an image that was going around the internet of the Pope in like a very large coat, a puffer coat, the puffer Pope, as I like to call it. And it spread the internet quickly because it looked so realistic. People thought, oh wow, look at the Pope wearing kind of a new outfit, that's so cool. And it took longer for the information to get out that was AI generated than it took for the image to spread initially. So it's one of those things that, like, bad news travels fast, right? The AI content can spread faster than a warning label behind it. So the idea that the warning label is attached to it, I think, is a relatively smart move. Now, the hard part is enforcing that, right? How do you prevent someone from scrubbing that away? How do you prevent someone from just kind of cutting a bit of the image off, the similar way that you would see with like a credit to a photographer? And it's very hard to enforce. There are some solutions where it sort of embeds the information in an image, or in the kind of GPT style text. There's like subtle hints that it was made with AI, but those are very hard to enforce. They're hard to prove. And so I think it's a good idea in practice. Ideally, it should work, but realistically, bad actors who would want to get around it will find a ways around that watermark. So I think it's a good first step, but I don't think it is the solution we need long-term. So in the question of whether we in the United States should kind of follow on to the way China is handling this with their watermarking system, I think that the US, due to our different rules of copyright, the way we handle kind of our fair use and our freedom of expression is different from China's. Requiring a watermark on content made with AI tools, I think, will be harder to achieve in the US than it would be in China. China already has a lot of structure for what is allowed on the internet within China. We don't. right? We're very open, there's very few limitations to what we can do online. And so for us to enforce it would be a lot more difficult. I don't think it would be a bad move for us to attempt to do so. I just don't think with our kind of form of capitalism, we will succeed. There's very little that we can do quickly enough to enforce this law in the US.